The world of The Witcher is filled with amazing characters, charismatic, frightening villains, awesome characters with unique destinies that you can't help but sympathize with, other characters and situations that reveal those characters. There are some characters that you kinda sink your teeth into and feel deeply for, and there are those that you heartily wish were dead. Creating a character of the latter type is the hardest thing to do, to give him such a negative nature, but to do it competently so that the villain doesn't look ridiculous, but threatening instead, permanently evil that hangs over the whole story. He's stronger than any hero and knows everything ahead of time, can predict absolutely any move of the protagonist, wins almost always. Yes, it's villains like that no matter what, mesmerize and keep the story going. There are several of them in the Witcher universe. We can't help but admire them, but there is one that we would like to talk about separately. A powerful sorcerer that rose from the bottom and developed his talent to incredible heights. Intelligent, but also insane, brilliant and charismatic. His name is Vilgefortz, and we have never told you his whole story, for he's worthy. Hello everyone, you are watching the Game Wiz channel. In any case, do stock up on warm tea as we begin the story of the greatest wizard of his generation, Vilgefortz of Rivia, from his early years and all the way through to the full maturity. Birth and young years. The path of one of Neverland's greatest villains began in the gutter of Lanexeter, the winter capital of the state called Cover and Pavis. It was into this very gutter that the boy that was never needed was thrown out by his mother, after his father decided to simply leave the family. And Vilgefortz's journey could have ended before it had even begun. But, as often the case is, the boy was rescued. One of the druids of Cover spotted the emaciated body of the boy, pulled him out and saved his life, having taken him to Cover's druid circle, hoping that this was destiny and that the boy would grow into a worthy successor to the druid trade. In fact, it really was destiny, and the boy did survive for a reason. But destiny had prepared a role for him far more than just another hermit who communicated with nature. Initially, Vilgefortz was grateful and loyal to the druids who saved his life, but during one of the druidic rituals, the boy's incredible magical gift became apparent. It became clear that one of Vilgefortz's relatives was a sorcerer, and this fact infuriated the boy greatly. He knew that mages were powerful. He knew that they often saved people and even helped them, real miracle workers. But then why did they leave him? Why just throw away their child insensitively and mercilessly? Doesn't a human life and the life of their own child mean anything to mages? All this made Vilgefortz suffer greatly, and in his suffering he hated the sorcerers with all his heart. When a middle-aged wizard spotted Vilgefortz in a circle of druids and offered to apprentice him to his talent, Vilgefortz laughed in his face. He angrily told him all that he thought of the mages. In response, the wizard merely shrugged his shoulders, confirming that he never cared. One more adept, one less. What difference does it make? Vilgefortz's hatred of mages only grew. Initially, he wanted to stay in the druid circle, but after a while, he realized that didn't feel like spending his life wandering from one sacred oak tree to another. One day, he simply walked away from the druids and finally faced real life on his own. That life was not sweet at all. The inability to find a normal job, a place to live, money, the need to starve and humiliate himself before those who could give at least some sustenance. All this led the young Vilgefortz to the slippery slope of the mercenary trade. Vilgefortz began stealing, killing, and taking orders from various guilds. The complexity of the orders grew with time, but so did the rewards and reputation. At the same time, Vilgefortz's skills were honed, his dexterity, stealth, and swordsmanship. Very soon he became a real killing machine, and he simply was not defeated in duels, although it rarely came to a fight, since Vilgefortz liked to fulfill his orders quietly. This stage in Vilgefortz's life was long and important, but it ended ignominiously. During one job, the mercenary found himself in a dangerous mess. There, he was on the verge of death, and in fear, he fled the battlefield. For this, Vilgefortz was called a marauder. Now, it was hard for him to find a place to survive. He was searched for, he could not get a job to be paid for, he was chased from everywhere. Because of this, Vilgefortz went all out. He went on to rape and pillage, which made him even more wanted and despised. His life was drowning and his fate was becoming hopeless. He was forced to wander a great deal, and in distant lands he even found a new weapon, an ordinary metal pole, the wielding of which was surprisingly easy for him. This weapon became Vilgefortz's best weapon. He gave up swords and sabers. He began to use his new staff in an attempt to find a way out of the swamp he had fallen into. And one day, everything changed. The mercenary met a sorceress, typically charming and very attractive. Vilgefortz fell head over heels in love with her. He was handsome and charismatic enough for the sorceress to pay attention to him. And very soon an affair began, thanks to which the magician was able to cope with himself, to put his thoughts in order, and to give up his destructive craft. But back then, he did not know how infantile wizards were. He did not expect becoming bored with by his girlfriend, and after this, everything would just end, and quite soon enough. The sorceress left Vilgefortz without any visible emotions, very quickly and easily. After that, the former mercenary changed. His feelings were mixed, non-mutual love, resentment, a sense of inferiority. The realization that in the girl he sought only a replacement for the mother who had once abandoned him, anger at himself. All this was mixed up and turned into hatred. Hatred for the sorceress who had abandoned him. Vilgefortz swore that he would never again endure such feelings, swore that now he himself would only use people, that he would trust no one else, and the trust of others would be used for his own purposes. Swore that he would never again be weak. Only might, only power. And he had that power. It never left him. An amazing magical gift. Vilgefortz cast aside his preconceptions and finally set himself on the path he was destined to follow. All the terrible things that had happened to him and that he himself had done had led to this path, to the path of the Sorcerer. Vilgefortz finally had a bright and clear purpose. He desired power, and he knew what he must do. Without much thought, the former mercenary returned to the Northern Kingdoms and went to the Bannard Academy. The Way of the Sorcerer, Elder Blood. The journey of a wizard named Vilgefortz was a grandiose one. No one knew about this gifted boy's past. He severed almost all ties with the cover underworld. Even his homeland, he chose another name for himself. Instead of Vilgefortz of Lanexeter, he called himself Vilgefortz of Rivia. No one knew anything bad about him, and thus there was no prejudice against him either. The young wizard simply came and conquered everyone with his magical talent. He was the best among his peers most of the time, no matter what magic was involved. Illusion, levitation, combat magic. No matter what, Vilgefortz was able to practice everything with such ease as if he had been practicing it for decades. An exceptional talent. Nevertheless, this talent was augmented by the young wizard's incredible enthusiasm and fanatical work ethic. Vilgefortz spent his days burying himself in the ancient scrolls and books of the most renowned spellcasters of his time. His teachers accepted this eagerness with the idea that Vilgefortz was striving for perfection. They could not have known that his main goal was power. In those books, the young Vilgefortz first found references to Laradorin and the Elder Blood gene, to the researches by Ainelle, the power and the might that this very Elder Blood bestows, to the ability to travel between worlds and the planes of being. Yes, this is what he has always dreamed of. It is the path to power. The idea of finding an heir to the Elder Blood was like an annoying itch. It had never left Vilgefortz since that time, so he began to dig, search for the slightest mention, compare rumors. Eventually, he came upon the truth. But by then, he was already a noble, a famous sorcerer, an accomplished sorcerer that taught others in the halls of Bannard, one of the youngest teachers of the Academy's history. He was courteous and polite. He knew how to win people over to his side, how to use their feelings. He developed an empathy that he could use against people who were too gullible. All these qualities made his career astonishing. He wrote several books on the craft of magic and became the talk of the highest circles, of the chapter of wizards itself. And soon, because of his prodigious abilities, Vilgefortz was honored as one of the youngest members of the great and formidable chapter of the gift and the art in history. That is how he came to the power he dreamed of, the power he wished for. He could not stop though, he only wanted more and more. He did not want ordinary magic. He dreamed of reaching another level. He dreamed of becoming a conqueror of worlds, and for that he needed the Elder Blood. Within a few years, Vilgefortz had found its trail. He found the clan in whose veins flowed this special blood. It was Rhiannon, the Lords of Cintra, and they had just had a very interesting incident with the transformation of a certain horrible humanoid hedgehog into a man, with the marriage of this very former monster to Princess Pavetta, and with the birth of an exceptional girl named Cirilla. Vilgefortz did a little more research, and he even found out who the humanoid hedgehog named Urchin really was. The true emperor of the Nilfgaard Empire, EMHYR of Emrys, who longed to regain his father's throne. Even without absolute power, Vilgefortz has been irrevocably corrupted by it, for megalomania has distorted his inner world beyond recognition. For reasons best known to him, the Sorcerer was determined to elevate himself to the level of a god, and he sought in everything around him the means to achieve his self-serving goal. For that, he believed, he needed the Elder Blood, and it flowed in the veins of one ash-haired girl born due to destiny, and the path to that ash-haired girl, Cirilla, lay through her parents. Vilgefortz realized that he had to act, so he began to secretly make contact with Ciri's father, EMHYR of Emrys. The treaty with EMHYR and political intrigues. No one in Cintra knew that Urchin, who had turned into a man, was in fact the true crown emperor of Nilfgaard. In his marriage to Pavetta, this same Urchin lived under the name Dunny, and it was as Dunny that all the courtiers knew him. EMHYR did not want the enemies who had usurped the throne in the empire to find out that he was alive. He did not want them to hunt him down. He wanted to strike first and regain his father's throne. And Vilgefortz was right there. On his way to Cintra, the already famous sorcerer at the time devised a very interesting plan. He told EMHYR who his little daughter Ciri really was. He told him about the Elder Blood gene, Lara Dorn's curse, and Itlin's prophecy, all that he had learned about himself. The wizard asked for only one thing in return, the opportunity to research the Elder Blood. He promised EMHYR and his family complete safety, but he knew that one moment he would have to get rid of the Emperor. Nevertheless, having dealt with morons and idiots in recent years, Vilgefortz underestimated EMHYR himself. But first things first. A plan had been developed. He had to act. First, get rid of Dunny and revive EMHYR, so that no one would find out who the disenchanted urchin of Erlenwald really was. For this purpose, Vilgefortz prepared a whole operation. EMHYR was to take his wife and daughter on a supposed sea trip by ship. At one point, Vilgefortz planned to open a huge portal right in the depth of the sea and move the ship to an ancient, abandoned castle about which almost no one knew anything, and around which the winds blew the sands of the desert, to the STYGGA castle. It was there where Vilgefortz set up his lair, and also where he planned to conduct his research, and from there, EMHYR of Emrys was to launch an operation to overthrow his enemies in Nilfgaard and return the throne to the rightful heir of the empire. The plan was good, but nothing is ever perfect. Almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong. At first, Pavetta decided not to take little Ciri with her on the trip. Something told her mother's heart that Ciri was better off staying home, and despite all EMHYR's protests, his wife showed remarkable fortitude in this matter. She could not be persuaded. The hour X was approaching. EMHYR had no choice but to board the ship with Pavetta, and then they talked. As the ship approached the abyss of Sedna, where the portal of Vilgefortz was to open, EMHYR decided to tell Pavetta the whole truth about who he was, about where they were sailing, about the fact that the girl would never see her kin again. For today, for all the world, Dunny and Pavetta were to die. In return, for all the world, EMHYR of Emrys was to be born. All this threw the princess into shock. A quarrel broke out between husband and wife. EMHYR tried to reason, but Pavetta would not listen. She became hysterical. A terrible storm came up all around, and then Pavetta fell overboard the ship. No one will ever know what really happened. Maybe EMHYR pushed Pavetta, thereby showing the utter callousness of his heart and wishing to remove the woman from his life. Or maybe she herself slipped because of the rolling waves of the storm and fell overboard accidentally. The second option is more likely, but no one will probably ever give an exact answer to that question, unless someone wants to go back in time and observe what happened, and then tell the whole world. In any case, Pavetta drowned to her death, and a moment later, the portal to the castle of Vilgefortz opened. There was no time for EMHYR to save his wife. EMHYR, along with the ship and his loyal crew, found himself in the desert near the distant STYGGA castle. The teleportation was successful, but neither Vilgefortz nor EMHYR got what they dreamed of. Vilgefortz ended up a loser everywhere. He had no access to the Elder Blood. Ciri remained in Sintra, and Pavetta died. Moreover, EMHYR of Emrys was not grateful at all. He was furious over the death of his wife, whom he did not love, but whom he did not want to harm either, and thus he simply broke his alliance with Vilgefortz, a huge failure. No power, no strong allies, only a huge waste of time. But at the time, Vilgefortz was already too maniacally obsessed with the idea of taking over the magic of the Elder Blood, and he was not going to stop so easily. He found companions among the fugitive, despised renegade wizards, Scoia'tael, and spies. He continued to literally bend people to his will, make them fall in love with him, use them, throw them out, force them to submit, and people were even willing to sacrifice their lives for this maniac, being devoted so much to him. Vilgefortz began to develop a new strategy. Ciri remained in Sintra. The Elder Blood was not lost, so it could still be reached. Another couple of years passed while searching for a way to solve the problem and gathering new information. During this time, the notorious Emperor EMHYR of Emrys regained the throne in the Nilfgaard Empire, and the first thing he did was to conquer all the states that were in his way. The goal of EMHYR was Sintra. It was within the walls of this city, the capital of the state of the same name, where Ciri was, and only by conquering Sintra could EMHYR get his daughter back. He could get to the Elder Blood that Vilgefortz told him about. Did EMHYR want to marry Ciri and have incest with his daughter? Or would he have taken pity on her and just kept her to himself? We can't answer these questions precisely yet. But one thing is certain, EMHYR became the Emperor of Nilfgaard and went to war with the rest of the world. Seizing the closest states, he reached the borders of Sintra, and in several battles he defeated the resisting army. And then he began to storm the capital, the city where the young Ciri was. The city was taken quickly, but Ciri herself escaped. She fled because of the pity of a Nilfgaard soldier who was tasked with a special mission. This soldier was to find Ciri in the city under siege and bring her back to Nilfgaard alive and well. This soldier's name was Kahir, and he did exactly half as well as he could. He found the girl in the burning city and saved her from death. He took her out of the looted Sintra, but he was not vigilant enough. Not enough for a young special girl to escape. So, Ciri was once again off the radar of the powers that be. What about Vilgefortz in the meantime? Oh, he wasn't sleeping, making connections, finding allies. When Nilfgaard went further north after Sintra in the Crazy War, Vilgefortz did something unprecedented. By then, he was already one of the heads of the chapter of wizards, and for the first time in hundreds of years, he had engaged the whole chapter in this very war. 22 mages, led by Vilgefortz himself, marched against Nilfgaard's army. Together with the armies of the north, they fought the legendary Battle of Sodden Hill, when the might of Nilfgaard was repulsed. And it was these very wizards that were the main reasons for the Northern Kingdom's success, the cause of Nilfgaard's defeat. They killed the soldiers of the invading army by the hundreds and thousands. The North won. Vilgefortz got his revenge on EMHYR, but his new plan was much bigger. Rather than finish off the defeated Colossus, Vilgefortz decided to negotiate with him. Using his enormous prestige, which had multiplied since the Battle of Sodden Hill, Vilgefortz negotiated a peaceful end to the conflict and a new border for Nilfgaard, right along the course of the Yaruga River. Vilgefortz became a really big player on the political scene of this world. This position pleased him, but he had already become a real maniac of his idea. he still wanted more. The Thanet Coup. During the truce, the great Vilgefortz, who had already been met with honors in all courts, became active. He found information about the sorceress named Yennefer and the witcher Geralt. In all the rumors about Ciri, these names always slipped in. Vilgefortz planned to find and interrogate Yennefer. He also planned to kill Geralt. To do so, he hired his associates, a renegade wizard named Rience and later a half-elf named Shiro. Both were very good at fire magic, sadistic, devoid of principles and cruel, and loyal to him. Perfect candidates for the job that came along. Vilgefortz himself had bigger plans. Despite the fact that it was his wizards who had stopped the Nilfgaard army, Vilgefortz first went to see Emperor EMHYR and offered him a deal. He promised to destroy the chapter of wizards from within, to weaken the kingdoms of the north, and to side with the empire. In return, as always, he wanted more power. EMHYR, of course, agreed to such a deal. Anything could be promised at that moment, but once the north was captured, the wizards would have nowhere to go. They would submit as well, temporary allies. The treaty was made, and it was time for the Thanet Coup. Vilgefortz announced to all the wizards of the chapter that an urgent meeting was needed on Thanet Island, and everyone came. The formal reason for that meeting was concern for the state of Sintra, captured by Nilfgaard, as if the wizards should discuss it. But in fact, Vilgefortz was planning a real coup, and he called the very Yennefer who was so strongly associated with Ciri to Thanet. Miraculously, Yennefer arrived in the company of Geralt, and she even brought a little girl with her, Ciri. A gift of fate, no less. But what Vilgefortz did not know was that not everything was in his hands that night. One mighty sorceress named Philippa Eilhart knew what was about to happen, and she decided to get ahead of the traitor. The night after the banquet, Vilgefortz and all his allies were captured and imprisoned in Dimeritium shackles. Yennefer brought Ciri to Thanet. Vilgefortz freed himself and freed his allies. A magical battle to the death began between the opposing wizards. Ciri tried to escape from there, protected by the witcher Geralt of Rivia, one of the best swordsmen in the north. In the end, the witcher and the wizard met in a duel, a physical one, and Vilgefortz was the one to surprise. Vilgefortz had traveled the world for many years as a mercenary, learning the customs of others and mastering a variety of exotic weapons. Among these, he was most fond of the battle staff. He was a consummate fighter, and the magic he was learning at the time made his skills even better. Drawing energy from the various planes, Vilgefortz cast the power of chaos into his staff. With a flick of his hand, the weapon struck its target like a battering ram, but remained as light as smoke. With that same magic, the wizard learned to strike without missing a beat. For those fools who fought Vilgefortz in hand-to-hand combat, the outcome of each fight was clear before the wizard even struck the first blow, which was often his last. It was almost the same with the witcher. Vilgefortz defeated him with ease and beat him to the point where the mutant monster slayer could not even move. Almost killed him, but he shouldn't have, for what came next was horror, a real failure. The girl Ciri, she hid in a portal on Thanet, in Tor Lara. It made the portal explode, and Vilgefortz was wounded. His body and face were disfigured by the shrapnel and debris from the explosion. Meanwhile, Vilgefortz's allies were losing the magic battle to Philippa Eilhart's followers. All the wounded sorcerer had to do was to escape with one last effort of will, straight through the portal, to his last stronghold, the STYGGA castle. From that day on, he was the most wanted man in the world. The northern kingdoms realized that he had tried to defect to the enemy. Nilfgaard, on the other hand, forced the Yaruga River, but did not get what Vilgefortz promised. No support, no weakening of the forces of the north from within. Enemy number one for all of the world. This was what he achieved. But even in this condition, mutilated, missing one eye, with terrible scars, Vilgefortz did not stop. He still had a purpose, the fulfillment of which would solve all his problems. He had to find Ciri and obtain the Elder Blood gene. The STYGGA Castle and the Last Stand. What happened next? Well, it's a long story, and we don't have much time. We'll advise you to wait for new Witcher World lore and history videos on our channel, or read the books by Andrzej Sapkowski. And the conclusion will be short but sufficient. To the end of his days, Vilgefortz never gave up hope of finding Ciri. He used the services of loyal mercenaries, established connections with the spies of Nilfgaard who were looking for Ciri for EMHYR Emirates, and also wanted the girl to die. Yennefer of Vengerberg was on his trail, and he imprisoned her in his castle, tortured her, captured girls and women, tried to extract the placenta from their living bodies, practiced, wanted to impregnate Ciri and do the same to her, for it was the heir of Laradoran's lineage, the heir to Ciri, that should have been the savior of worlds and possessed the greatest power, and power was everything to him. Sometime after Yennefer was imprisoned by Vilgefortz, Ciri came for her, hoping to free her. The Sorcerer thought it was a gift from Destiny, but Destiny played a cruel game with him. After Ciri came Geralt of Rivia and his friends, the same Geralt the Witcher that Vilgefortz had beaten to a pulp on Thanet. He got healed, got stronger, and this time he was prepared. Eventually, there was a battle in the vaults of the STYGGA castle. Vilgefortz was strong, mighty. He healed his wounds from Thanet, even grown from scratch the flesh of the real eye he had lost. He could have had the strength to do almost anything. He easily destroyed the weakened Yennefer in a magical duel. He didn't let Geralt move either. With his bare hands, he melted the flesh of the higher vampire Regis, almost killing the seemingly unkillable creature for good. All of this, once again, at the same time, in one battle. He defeated Geralt again in a duel with his staff and wanted to finish him off, but suddenly he missed. Then again, and once again. A few moments and the Witcher was already back on his feet and made 2 swings with his sword, a blow to the stomach and neck. The astonished look on Vilgefortz's face, who looked with disbelief at the flowing streams of his blood. And then another blow by the Witcher, and the decapitated body falls to the ground. The end of the road. A simple illusion, a seemingly uncomplicated piece of magic distracted Vilgefortz for a second, and that was enough. The villain fell victim to his arrogance. Vilgefortz's journey was amazing. His story is impressive. From the boy from the gutter to the greatest sorcerer of his generation, to the mighty wizard who knew no barriers, but went mad in the long run, desiring to be a true god, and eventually losing that race to the Olympus. He is a villain, and we all know that villains always lose. The GameWiz channel, on the other hand, always wins when you like our videos, comment on them, and press the bell button. You guys are incredibly motivating, and it helps the channel grow. Which heroes or villains of the Witcher's world should we tell you more about? Do write about it in the comments. Also, write how you feel about Vilgefortz. Huge thanks to each and every one of you for watching, and see you soon.